Can a horror movie be good if it's not scary?
Of course.
Okay. So let me give a bit of a. I'll be the counter here because I have a. When you talk about horror films, right? I mean, there are some films that kind of like are horror, and they're not intended to be scary. And for those, I would say sure, like those don't need to be scary. But if your movie is intended to be scary, if you're trying to make it scary and it's not, then I would say it is hard for me to say that is good. If you are feeling at your intentions, then that I think is a big minus point. Some of my favorite horror movies, if they hadn't scared me, I don't think I would have liked them.
So, but like scary is so subjective. It's like saying what's funny. Like what's funny is different to so many people. I mean, like some people will tell me they think their scariest movie is, whatever, and it's some movie that's just loaded up with cheap jump scares. And I'm like, that's not scary. I mean, sure. I mean, I jumped, but that's cheap. Like that's not
that's
like
startling. That's not actually scary.
It's not gonna sit with me. Where like to me, I'll have people that'll tell me a movie sucks because it wasn't scary, but it's some long, drawn out, slow burn, like dread movie where like the fears of the unknown. So it's like, I just think it's a very subjective thing to say what's scary, intrinsically scary. Like I always think something that's longer that doesn't show you what's happening. Horror movies always fall off once they show you what's happening. Like the scariest part of every horror movie is when you don't know what's happening.
So I show that, but I would say that it doesn't matter that it's subjective, right? Though it matters because this is about my personal enjoyment, right?
Sure,
I think a movie is good, and so whatever definition I'm using for scary, and I'm more like you. I think overloading with jump scares is kind of more obnoxious than anything. Having like that kind of creepy, kind of dreadful feeling. I'm thinking there's a lot of movies that if you took that out of the movie, it's actually not that interesting. Like there's not that much interesting things going on, just like plot wise. But because it does such a good job at tone and like giving you that kind of like the heebie-jeebies, that elevates it and it becomes now a good movie. Like what would not be a good movie is now a good movie because it does that so well. And to me, that means that if it hadn't done that, if it hadn't been scary, and I know it's a little bit semantical, but then it wouldn't have been a good movie. And so I think that there is, there's some cases where scary movies need to be scary to be good.
So
horror movies need to be scary to be good.
Fair enough. Y'all need to stop calling out The Grudge like that. Like you're now, here's the thing. I'm gonna have to take Brett's position on this, and this is why. So I recently, like a couple weeks ago, I saw Fright Night. Okay, and the fact of the matter is that movie, and it was the '80s version, right? And that movie wasn't scary to me. I just didn't find what was happening at any point essentially very scary. I guess there was like one element at the end that I thought was kind of off-putting. That's the best I can do. But I enjoyed that movie immensely. And that's because, and the reason I enjoyed that movie immensely is because of the way the movie puts its heart into what it's doing. The way it's trying to create a certain a certain style with its vampires, and it really holds true to that style the entire movie, and I enjoyed that style. And I'm pretty sure that movie was supposed to be scary when it came out. Scary and funny. It's supposed to be one of those comedy horror things, I felt. Maybe that's been lost. Maybe that's partially related to just that the effects haven't aged very well. But at the same time, I don't feel like I got a really lesser experience at any point in that movie just because I didn't think it was a scary movie, So yeah, I don't think that scariness has anything to do with. well, I shouldn't say anything to do. Scariness is not a big predictor of how good a horror movie is, in my opinion. However, I do think it is a big predictor on whether you will be disappointed by a horror film if you went in hoping to be scared. Because essentially, what this means is that if you go into a movie, this is like what I was talking about last week, where if the purpose of you going into your horror movie is to get that fear sensation, and then it doesn't give it to you, you will be disappointed, regardless of how good the movie is. So, I don't know. That's my perspective.
Let me, because as an example, I saw The Exorcist, right? This is the 70s.
Like the original Exorcist.
Well, the problem with The Exorcist, I think, is, and by the way, I love The Exorcist, but over the years, that's kind of been touted as, like, it's got that tagline, the scariest movie ever.
Yep.
It is not.
Hype.
It's not even really that scary. What it is, though, is a very well-made, I kind of want to say, maybe almost drama film. And actually, I've liked to make this joke with Braden over the years, where I think some of our favorite horror films are, the majority of the film is just people being miserable and stressed out and screaming at each other.
Yep.
And then spooky things happen at the end. and then I felt like The Exorcist was a little bit of a precursor to that, because at the heart of that movie is sort of, the big theme of, like, God versus the devil, a priest dealing with his own feelings about his religion and how and his mother's death, and then just a mother caring for her daughter who's exhibiting extremely weird behavior, and that makes for good dramatic elements.
Based on
in terms of the actual, I guess, horror aspect, it's, I mean, there is a lot of spooky stuff, I think, in that movie, but I can
especially
see
for its time.
Definitely 73. Holy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right,
I could totally see someone watching that nowadays and being like, "What?"
Right. And so how does someone who only bases something on how well it scares me today go back and watch those classics? Are they now terrible movies because they don't have all the, like, effects and bells and whistles that you can put on a movie now? Is someone like that going to go back and watch The Shining and be like, it didn't scare me, terrible horror movie? Like, you know?
Are we talking about Braden here? This sounds like Braden.
Oh my God. Or, like, go back and watch, like, a Rosemary's Baby, go way back, and then be like, sucks. I'm not scared.
There are classic horror movies that I like. Like, I like Rosemary's Baby. I do.
Yeah, it's so good.
I was disappointed in both The Exorcist and The Shining.
Really?
And part of the reason, and I mean, Adam's point by expectations, I guess, is taken. But both of those movies were described to me as some of the scariest movies you've ever seen. So that was my expectations going to,
like, your
by
parents?
reviewers, and also, yes, actually, my parents did.
I was going to say, because it was when they saw it when they were kids.
Okay, but this is the thing, is that I think that it is fair to say, if they got, because when those movies were made, they were made with the intention of being scary. Those directors filmed it in a way to scare people, and I just don't believe, as much as you could like the drama elements of it and whatever, I don't believe that you are getting as good an experience as the people who watched it back then and also felt scared, in addition to all those elements. I think they had the better movie experience than I did watching it now and not being scared. I think I've missed out on, like, a big part of what made those movies so beloved.
It's like going to see Star Wars when it first hit the theaters. Those people saw a way cooler thing than you did, because it was this new thing. You know, this fresh experience.
So I feel like we're kind of brushing up against a kind of a literary theory here issue, and this is like once you get to this point, it's kind of hard to have the debate anymore. But there's a question of, where does the value of something come from? Does it come from the thing itself, or does it come from your interaction with it? Like, do you bring that with you? And I understand Braden's point. Like, okay, well, from his perspective, we bring the value. Like, in order for something to be a good experience, then it needs to work with me when I'm experiencing it. It's not inherent in the film itself. There isn't anything about the film that is inherently. But I don't know. I don't know if I'm ready to go fully with that perspective, because I think that you can. It's a difficult, I don't know, a thing to consider, but I think that maybe it is fair to say that there are some things that a movie does really well on its own. Okay.
Of course.
And so, like, for example, some of the most classic cinematography. I'm not the cinematography guy. Maybe JL can speak about this. If we talk about like some classic, like shots or thing, then and like many people have seen those shots who know a lot about shots and will say these are good. They're good because of this. I can explain why it's good. Then doesn't that movie have something good, regardless of whether someone enjoyed it or not? Do you see what I mean? So, and I feel like that's kind of what's in play here. Isn't a horror movie good because of the things it does, regardless necessarily of whether our reaction to it is different every single time?
I also get pretty fired up about this just because I know certain people who I would consider to be like casual watchers of horror, which is fine, but like almost like to go see whatever the new big horror movie is and like want to be able to say as a badge of honor when they walked out of it, like it wasn't scary. It sucks. Like almost like they're trying to like get like a pat on the back for being like in their late 20s and not getting scared by fiction. Like, you know, I'm like, congrats. Like you weren't scared by the new blockbuster. Like, you know, that's great. You know, it doesn't make the movie not good because you were sitting there like, I'm not gonna get scared. Like, scare me. You know, I hate that attitude of like, because then those are the same people who will toss out any slow burns, which I understand just not liking them as films, but just because you're not willing to do the work to like immerse yourself in what's going on and appreciate the atmosphere that's being built, that's more on you. Like maybe it's just not for you. Like doesn't mean the movie is bad or a bad horror movie. You know, I hate that kind of mentality just drives me nuts.
Okay.
I get that argument all the time.
I can understand.
Related to point, I'm gonna. Oh, sorry. You can say something.
Or I was just gonna say, yeah, I think for me, just so a movie like, say, The Witch or Hereditary.
That's exactly what I was thinking of, The Witch.
Yeah, I would say I probably found those movies about as scary as The Exorcist, and I'm not trying to do they didn't scare me type movies, but I guess I found the horror elements from the kind of the drama. You kind of have to put yourself in to the minds of the characters to experience the horror, which I really like. Like there's that scene in Hereditary, and I'm not going to try to spoil anything, but a character is driving a car really fast and something happens and the camera just focuses on the driver and kind of their reaction. And that I thought was one of, even though nothing like spooky is going on, that was a horrifying moment. That was one of the most memorable scenes in the film, I thought.
That's one of the most memorable scenes I've seen in quite some time from like a lot of movies. The way
but if you put yourself into the shoes of that character, it's terrifying. It is actually horrifying.
One of the most horrifying things that could happen in your life as a teenager, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I will say, as someone who loves The Witch, I love that movie. I do think that it was made with a different intention than The Exorcist was. The Exorcist was filmed, again, with the intention of this was like really going to scare your pants off. And I don't think The Witch was. I don't think the director was intending it to be that kind of movie that gives you nightmares. It was supposed to be this kind of more drama-centric with like some creepy elements in it. And because it succeeded at what it aimed to do, to me, it's the better movie.
See, in a movie like that falls under why it's like kind of like this big tent of horror, because you'll see debates on like Reddit or wherever people talk about horror, like The Witch isn't even a horror movie, you know. Then people go down that road, like what is a horror movie? And you're like, it's a really broad stroke to paint like what it could be, but it's like without a doubt, if you're going to put it anywhere, it's going to be in horror. And like you said, it's more about just it's much comedy. More like right. It's a much more artsy film. Like something like The Witch is way more. It feels like you're reading like a classic novel, you know, when you're watching that. And it definitely requires like the viewer to be very patient and buy into what it's selling you. Like
But
you're
it's
not
such a
seeing the
rewarding
whole thing until
experience.
the end. It is. It's great.
Yeah.
I love that movie.